Thanks for joining me today. Keith Ayers here, CEO of Integro. The subject for today is keeping DiSC alive for facilitators. And as we said in the blurb that went out to everybody about this, inviting you to come, the main focus is on support reports, okay? I'll just go to the agenda and we can clarify a little bit more about that. So I'm going to start off with a couple of basics. And anytime I'm talking about DiSC, I want to remind people of two things: the whole person concept and the DiSC theory model, because that underpins all of the DiSC profiles and really helps people understand what DiSC is all about. Okay, so I'm not going to spend much time on those. In fact, I'm not even going to build them. I'm just going to bring up the completed slides just to remind you, because I think probably all of you, if not most of you, are pretty familiar with those models. Okay. Then I'm going to start with a support report called a supplement for facilitators. And I'm sure many of you are familiar with that report, and hopefully you use it. But given the number of people who've registered for this, I suspect there's some people who are not using it. And it is a fantastic addition to your DiSC training to use a supplement for facilitators. So we're going to go through that and make sure you understand why, in my opinion, you should always use it. All right. And then we're going to just have a look at one of the more recent reports that's come out of Wiley called DiSC Styles Expanded. Some of you may have seen that. The only way you can actually see this model from Wiley is if you do the certification training, because that's where it came into being in the certification training. But we would recommend that you use it more broadly than that, and we'll explain why when we get to that. Okay. Then we're going to look at the support reports called comparison report first, and hopefully a lot of you are familiar with the comparison report, but I want to talk about how we can use that very effectively. I just did a one-day DiSC session with a leadership team from Sydney Water the other day, and in preparation for doing 5 behaviors. And the comparison reports was what really got them excited about DiSC, because most of them were not very familiar with DiSC, and they really found that very powerful. Okay, it's something that we should be using. Okay, the group culture report. Now we could talk about the group culture report and the facilitator report in our certification training. We don't spend a lot of time on it, and we frequently get calls from clients wanting to know if there are any group reports or which one should I use here, the group culture report or the facilitator report. And so I'm going to go into a little more depth about how to use those reports today, okay, to extend the impact that you're having with your DiSC training. Okay. Then myeverythingdisc.com, which is an online portal that it's been around for 4 or 5 years now. But if you're not using it, you can get a lot of value out of that. The most recent development from Wiley is Catalyst. And we've done several webinars on Catalyst. And we talk to as many clients as possible about Catalyst. But I'm just going to explain how these support reports can be supportive of the Catalyst work that you're doing as well, and also talk a little bit about what's coming with Catalyst, okay? Because that's sort of where Wiley are putting all their research dollars into, okay? And then continuing the journey with DiSC. So if we've got time, I'm going to just do a quick overview of the productive conflict profile and the agile EQ profile as a fantastic way of extending the DiSC journey with participants. And the reason I'm focusing just on those two of the other suite of the suite of DiSC profiles is that they are profiles you can use with everyone in the organization. Anyone you can use workplace with, you can use productive conflict, and you can use agile EQ. Okay. Whereas obviously the management profile would be more just for managers and so on. Okay. All right. So let's dive in. The whole person concept. The purpose of this is to help people understand what DiSC is really all about. All right, so the idea of this whole person concept is to help understand why people do what they do. All right, people behave the way they do because of what's going on underneath the waterline, hence the iceberg analogy. Okay, and then at the bottom of the iceberg we have the needs, and it's the psychological needs that drive the DiSC behavior. Okay, and I think that's important to understand, because the word preferences is used a lot, widely used a lot to talk about DiSC, that I have a preference for D behavior. To me, a preference is a conscious choice. All right. When someone who's naturally a D style leaves home in the morning, they don't leave the door saying, I think I'll use my D behavior today. They just behave in a way that's instinctive for them. And why do they behave that way? Because it satisfies the needs that are most important to them at the bottom of the iceberg. And if they have never done a DiSC profile, then they are probably doing it unconsciously. They're not aware of why they're using the behavior they're using, but they're using it in order to achieve results. Okay, so this is a really important model. I would never run a session on DiSC without starting with this whole person concept, because we're going to tie back to this a number of times throughout any training program. Okay, and I have a poster of this that I'll stick up on the wall when I'm facilitating DiSC training. Okay, the DiSC theory model. All right, now I've got it built, so there's a lot of information on here. Let's drill down to the foundations of this, which are the needs for affiliation and control. Okay, two needs that determine how you behave when you're interacting with other people. All right, and so if you have a high need for affiliation, the right-hand end of the horizontal scale, then you will affiliate with people. You'll seek people out to interact with, to talk to be with. Okay, because your needs are best met when you're with people. All right. The opposite end of the scale is the low need for affiliation, and we've got the word detached there to describe the behavior. All right. Now, people with a low need for affiliation obviously have a high need for something else, and in fact, it's usually something. Well, in fact, almost always it's something more task-oriented, doing research, doing something technical, pulling something apart, putting it back together again. Okay, and so when you're concentrating on that, working on a spreadsheet actually is another good example here, and working on the formula and all that kind of stuff. Okay, when you're working on something like that, and that's something that's going to satisfy your need, people are a nuisance. They want to talk to you. And so you're going to best achieve your needs by detaching from people to concentrate on the task. Okay, so that's the horizontal scale. On the vertical scale, we have the need for control. All right, now we are talking about a need to control others. All right, and I remember having a participant on a workshop some time ago who was a really strong C style, and I was taking them through this DiSC theory model, and he said, well, hang on a second. He said, I've got a really high need for control. I said, what do you like controlling? And it was controlling projects, controlling tasks. I want to make sure everything's correct. Yeah, we're not talking about that. We're talking about the need to be in charge of other people. Okay, and so people who have a high need for control, take charge. Those with a low need for control adapt to those who are taking control. All right, and they're perfectly happy for others to take control. Okay, now it doesn't mean we're fixed in those positions. Obviously, if you've got a low need for control, there'll be times where you decide you need to take control because what's happening isn't what you want to happen. All right, and if you do, you will actually adapt and move up that control scale, all right, to the top and actually take charge. All right. Likewise, if you have a low need for affiliation, but you want to persuade someone to do something, and you need to affiliate with them, you need to be more persuasive and talkative, then you've got to slide along the affiliation scale to adapt to do that. And obviously you can slide in other directions as well. Okay, so then we've got the outstanding need for each of the styles, and we've got the fear for each of the styles, the primary fear. Okay, now if we look at those needs, and I won't go through them all because I know a lot of you have seen this many times, but it's that psychological need that drives the behavior that we see. So a dominant person is using behavior that achieves things, that achieves results, okay, and so on. The S style uses behavior that gains people's acceptance of them. What a good person, how helpful they are. They're very supportive and helpful and do stuff for me. Okay, what a good person. So that's how we get our needs met, is through our behavior. All right, and when we adapt, the more effective we are at adapting, the more effective we'll be as a person. All right, no matter what your role is and no matter what your style is, there's times when your style works perfectly well. There's times when it doesn't. And when it doesn't, I'll be more effective if I adapt to use a different style. Okay. And when I adapt, I move out of my comfort zone and the fear kicks in. So the more conscious I am of this model and the fears that tend to hold me back from adapting out of my comfort zone, the more I can move through those fears and adapt and become more effective. Okay. So this is a great model also for helping people be more adaptable and also be more emotionally intelligent. Because emotional intelligence is a lot more than self-awareness, isn't it? Being aware is one thing. Do I have the ability to adapt my behavior, especially in situations which could be a bit stressful for me, okay, because of the fear? All right. The supplement for facilitators is the first report I want to go through. And if you're not familiar with this, it's available with everything DiSC profile. All right. And it's called the supplement for facilitators because it was designed by Wiley to help the facilitator of a session get more insight into the participants so they could help them with their challenges and help them stretch and grow and all that kind of stuff. The information in this report is so valuable that we think it should not be limited to the facilitator. And at Integro, we produce the supplementary report and give it to every participant we take through a DiSC profile. Okay, and that's what we encourage on certification training as well. We spend quite a bit of time in the certification training on understanding this report, how to interpret it, and so that our facilitators that are going out to use DiSC have also been well trained in how to use this. Okay, there's 3 parts to the supplement for facilitator report. The first part is the umbrella graph, which is the bit on the left, okay? And the purpose of the umbrella graph is to assign your style, that is to determine where your dot goes, all right? And the umbrella graph is an illustration of how you scored on each of the 8 scales. So you can see we've got D, I, S, and C scales, and then we've got 4 combination scales. And when you answer the DiSC questionnaire, you're responding to items for each of those 8 scales, all right? And your position on that scale is plotted based on your raw score. Okay, so this is my umbrella graph, my profile, and you can see that I've scored really strong on the IS scale, the S scale, but also the DI scale. But my dot's placed just below the SI scale and in the S quadrant, but close enough to the I that I'm an SI style rather than a straight S style, okay? And if you look at my umbrella, it makes sense that my dot would be somewhere in there because that's the biggest part of my umbrella, okay? And I've just got this spike on the DI scale. And what happens sometimes when I take the assessment, and it happened just recently when we were doing the assessment again. I can't remember exactly why we did it again, but everyone in the team did it again recently. And I got the adaptive testing questions, which we call tiebreaker questions, because I scored equally strong on DI and SI. And so it gave me 5 questions with a description of DI on one side and an SI on the other side. And it said, which one of these is most accurate about you? And there were 4 choices, so no middle choice. And as a result of that, I end up choosing the SI ones as being more accurate for me. And anyone who knows me knows that's true. Okay. Yes, I know how to use that DI behavior, but it's not who I really am. Okay. So that's the umbrella graph. That's the first part. Now and I've got the DiSC map in the middle to show how it shows where my dot falls. Okay. Now the bucket I was asked about that bucket this morning. What's the bucket doing there? In the certification training, and that's where I got this slide from, we have a session about the adaptive testing assessment, all right? And there are two types of questions. There's big bucket questions and little bucket questions. The big bucket questions are designed to identify where your dot goes. In other words, all of the big bucket questions plot into your umbrella graph, okay? Because that's what determines your dot. Now, the little bucket questions are your priority questions, and they do not determine where your dot goes. They determine what your priorities are, which you can see in the middle there, and I'll come back to that in just a moment, okay? So that's the umbrella graph, and it's identifying where your dot goes. Okay, the middle part of the supplement for Facilitator Report is the most interesting and really gets people's attention. These are unexpected items. These are items that are from the questionnaire, from the 8 scales, that I've responded to in such a way that is unexpected for someone with my style. I'm not expected to be stubborn, to get impatient with incompetent people, to get irritated by illogical people, etc. Okay, but I've agreed with those statements. The 5 means I strongly agreed, and the 4 means I agree. Okay, but that's not typical of someone with an SI style. Now, how the report identifies this, and I'm not sure if you can see my arrow my mouse when I move it around. I think you can. Yes. Okay, so my dot's here, which is closest to the SI scale. So the program looks across to the DiSC scale and says, did Keith agree with any items over here? Right. And then it'll pop them in this report. Now, there's room for 10 items in here, and obviously, with the very low score I've got on DiSC, I'm not going to have too many items from over here. So then it's going to go to the D scale and the C scale to see if I agreed with any items there. So in other words, it's looking for items you agreed with opposite where your dot is, okay? And it pops them in the report. And I've got 10, and they're all from DiSC, D, or C. The C ones are obvious. Accuracy is a priority for me. I strongly agree with that. Maybe that's why I was a pretty good navigator in the Air Force many years ago. So I've got some C, but it doesn't show up in my profile. It's more in my, well, I'm not sure what it is. It's just something that I'm good at. Okay, maths was one of my strong suits in school. Okay, so that's where they're coming from. All right, now what's the use of this? Okay, let me show you the best application of this. Okay, I'm going to come back to my other screen here and move forward. These are my 10 unexpected items. Okay, I should add, if you've done this report, if you've printed this report and you've got a 1 or a 2 in brackets after it, that's because you disagreed with something that you're expected to agree with. Okay, so if after going through all the items on the opposite side of your DiSC map from your dot, it hasn't got 10, there's still room for more items in this report. It'll actually come back to where your dot is and look at the 3 scales on that side, like in my case, S, I, and S, to see if I disagreed with anything that I'm expected to agree with. And then a strongly disagree would be a 1 and a disagree would be a 2. So, but I don't have any of those because I had so many that I agreed with. Okay, so let's come back to this. What I'm going to do now is look at page 4 in my workplace profile. The narrative report, your dot tells a story. This is the real value of understanding these unexpected items. And if you're not using it like this, your participants will really love it when you do. Okay, so first of all, I disagreed with, you probably dislike rapid, unpredictable change. All right, and that's probably more to do with my, well, it bothers me when people waste my time, would be one of the unexpected items that might relate to that. You may be hesitant to move ahead with bold changes if you're unsure that everyone's on board. Well, again, it bothers me when people waste my time. So why would I be hesitant to move ahead with bold ideas? Okay. And then the other thing I disagreed with, I identified here as an unexpected item that explains why I disagreed with that in my report, is that I can be pretty forceful with my opinions. Okay. So I'm not likely to be hesitant to move ahead with bold changes if I'm unsure everyone's on board. I'm going to express my opinions. Okay. And so then we, one more example. you may have found that you're so accepting that you can get yourself into trouble by trusting people who don't deserve it. I've done quite a bit of that in the past, but I don't do that so much now, right? And so I disagreed with that. And then I look at the unexpected items that might relate to that. I tend to be more questioning, and I'm not as easily impressed, certainly not as easily impressed as I used to be. All right. And when I say I used to be, that brings to the fore the fact that these unexpected items are quite likely learned behaviors. I know they are for me. All right. I haven't always used those behaviors. Some might question whether I use them all the time now as well. But I certainly can relate to getting impatient with incompetent people and getting irritated by illogical people, etc. Okay. All right. So the third part of the supplement is the priority subscales. And this is the little bucket questions, right? So when you're responding to the adaptive testing assessment, after answering all the base questions that plot on the umbrella graph and determine where your dot goes, you've got other questions mixed in there. And if you identify them, you'd say, oh yeah, I can see that that's a priority question, like results are important to me, for example. Okay. And so this scale here is up to 100%. You can see I scored 100% on collaboration and support, which are the two priorities closest to my dot. So I was allocated those anyway. Everybody's allocated 3 automatically. All right. Now, I was also allocated enthusiasm, and as you can see, I've scored just below 60% on that. So it's not really all that important. It's still important, but not as important as the other 2. But then I've also scored to 100% on action. And that's why I've got the striped shading. Okay, so I'll just point out here that there's a dotted line across there at 78%. To get an additional priority with the striped shading like I have on action, you need to score 78% or above on one of the priorities that's not your allocated 3. Okay, so so this is also valuable additional information. See, this is telling me that I can see why I have this extra priority on action, because I've actually answered questions that say, hey, that's really important to me. Okay, even though that won't show up in my profile, except on page 5, it'll show that I've got striped shading on action. Okay, so okay, so that's the why would you use the supplementary report? Because you can help people personalize their workplace profile or their management profile by better understanding, why did I disagree with these things in the narrative report? I've got these unexpected items. That's why I disagreed. That makes sense. Okay, so it gives people a lot of additional insight. Okay, and they really appreciate that. Okay, DiSC styles expanded. About 4 or 5 years ago, Dr. Mark Scullard, the Director of Research at Wiley, got up and spoke at a conference, and he just elaborated on some of these psychological needs for the different styles, and people went nuts about it. Because what he's done here is gone a deep dive into the psychology behind each of the 8 scales. All right, so when we're talking scales, we're talking DIID as being one, etc. When we're talking styles, DI and ID are different styles. Slightly different, but different. Okay. Now, this DiSC styles expanded. There's a booklet that we've been able to create with Wiley's help to provide detailed information about each of these needs. So if you look in the report, pretty much all of the scales have a 1-page report. So for me, the ISSI scale, there's a section for each of those 3 needs: positivity, goodwill, and empathy. And there's 2 paragraphs about each, right? And it's explaining how these needs show up in me and my behavior, all right? And so it's really, it's relatively new information, but it's very powerful information. Most people read through the descriptions for those 3 needs for their style and go, oh my God, how do they know that? Because it's so accurate. I mean, I read it and I was like, how does Mark know that about me, right? But it makes a lot of sense, right? But what's good about it is it tells me why I do what I do. And there are times when that need gets me into trouble. Like, I have a need for empathy. It's not telling me I am empathetic. It's telling me I have a need to be empathetic, all right? That means I need to think about other people's needs and how things are affecting them. And in the description, it actually says something along the lines of, you'll even be looking at other people's and why other people might be doing what they're doing when they're hurting you. All right. So I'm not protecting myself. I'm needing to be empathetic. So there's times where I actually need to cut that off, obviously, and think about my own needs rather than letting other people maybe take advantage. All right. So same thing with positivity. One of the things I learned from reading that was that I hate problems because I subconsciously interpret problems as negative. Okay. And I'd rather just be positive all the time, as Kelly would know. I think my positivity drives her nuts sometimes. So anyway, that's DiSC Styles Expanded. If you would like a copy of that document, let the team know, and we can send you out the PDF file for that. Okay, and when you do, have a read of the description for your 3 needs, and there's a little worksheet in the back that helps you reflect on that and answer some questions about that. And if you do that, let us know what you think once you've had a look at it. Okay, because I do think it's amazingly accurate. All right. The other benefit of this is when you understand it, because as a facilitator, you're going to have people attending your sessions. We may have people attending this session who are DiSC or CD style. Right. Now look at the needs here. Right. The need for mastery. Well, they'd have to be the best at everything. Right. And competence comes with that. Competence is extremely important to them, and they're extremely intolerant of people they see as being incompetent. Okay. They can't stand incompetence. Okay. But they're also invulnerable, which is really interesting when we get someone like that on a 5 behaviors profile and a session, and the first skill or first behavior we're learning is to be vulnerable, vulnerability-based trust. Okay, so being aware of that for a DiSC style would be very helpful. Oh, I can see now why I'm struggling with this vulnerability thing. I have a need to be invulnerable, but they also have a need to resist. And so if you're the facilitator of a group where you've got someone who's resisting what you're doing, it's not personal. They have a need to resist everything so that they can pull it apart and then eventually understand it and master it. Okay, so great document. So chase us up about that. Okay, all right. So I'm going to dive into the other support reports now. The comparison report. I'm sure many of you are really familiar with this. All right, here's me with Sue, and I'm sure some of you had some dealings with Sue. Sue is sitting right next to me, actually. So here's Sue and I comparison. And the first thing it's going to show us is where our dots sit. And as you can see, we're not very far apart. We're both in the S quadrant, right? And we both have an additional priority. My additional priority is on action, which is the furthest priority away from Sue's dot, isn't that? Right, her number 1 priority is stability. My number 1 priority is action. Okay, not number 1 priority, but one of my priorities is action. Okay, and so Sue also has an extra priority on collaboration, which is good because that's my number 1 collaboration, and so that helps us prioritize things together. Might over prioritize collaboration sometimes. Okay, so the looking at the actual report, what the profile does is comparison report, that is, it compares you on 9 continua. That's what's in the background in the program. But it publishes a report with 6 continua in it. And it starts with the continua where you are most different. All right. So where Sue and I are most different is on daring, careful. And then we can personalize that and look at the tendency. So I tend to see changes invigorating. Sue tends to see major changes as risky or stressful. Okay. It's good to know that, isn't it? All right. If we're working on a project together. Okay. So the first 4 continua out of the 6 are going to be where we're furthest apart on these continua. Okay. At the bottom of each of these 6 pages, the 6 continua, we can see the tendencies there again, but there's got potential roadblocks, potential benefits, and tips for working with Sue. All right. So roadblock, if I see Sue as being overly conventional or risk averse, or Sue sees me as my approach to be somewhat reckless, that could get in the way of us working together, which is what a roadblock would be. However, if we were to look at the positives, right, my bold ideas may lead to valuable improvements, and Sue's sense of caution helps keep unpleasant surprises to a minimum. All right. So I think that having the way we use this when you're getting people to use the reports together is, are any of these roadblocks getting in the road for us occasionally and how we work together? And let's switch to the benefits. If we start focusing more on the benefits, we're going to have a more positive relationship. Okay. And then I've got tips for working with Sue, right? And Sue's got tips for working with me. And obviously her tips are different because we're coming from a different direction. Okay. But very valuable information. So then this is just one more continue, just to show we're still a long way apart when we look at calm, energetic. Okay. Now you might be wondering why myself as a SI style would be so, was it daring? I think it was. Yep. And Sue's careful, which is you'd expect from her SC style. Okay. And I'm energetic. But hang on, I'm an SI style. All right. But remember, I have an additional priority on action. So where your dots are plotted in these comparison reports based on how you answered specific questions that measure to each continuum. All right. It's not plotted based on where your dot sits in the DiSC map. Okay. So my extra priority comes into account. My unexpected items come into account. All of that comes into account when it's plotting your position on each of these 6 continua. Okay, so it's an extremely accurate plot based on your specific answers. So very accurate and very powerful report. Okay, all right. So then I'm just going to go on to 2 group reports. Okay, and we cover these in the certification training, but we don't go into much detail. All right, and a group culture report is looking at a group of people and where they plot on the DiSC map. So here we see a sample. Where 41% of the people in this group are in the C quadrant. Okay, we have 24% in D and 18% each in I and S. Okay, so this also shows the percentage of each of the 4 styles in a different kind of graph with the priorities underneath to highlight what the differences are within the group. Okay. Also, in the group culture, in the culture section, all right, for each of the 4 styles, we have a couple of pages talking about the culture in the group. So we can see here that the D culture rewards independence, decisiveness, directness, etc., and it criticizes oversensitivity, hesitation, overanalysis, etc. Okay, and so we've got the advantages of the D culture and then drawbacks of the D culture. So what do we do with this? Well, actually, if you're working with a group that has a primary D culture, these questions at the bottom of the screen there, they zoom up a bit, okay, and break the group into smaller chunks to discuss these questions. So what are the advantages and drawbacks of D culture? How does it support and inhibit the success of the group? Do you take time to calculate risks? Do you waste time with power struggles, etc.? Okay, so really useful discussion to understand the impact of the culture on the way we're functioning and how it's affecting the way we function. Okay. There's also additional questions and down the bottom here, issues to consider. All right. How do people who aren't in the D region feel about this culture? What are their frustrations and challenges? All right. How does the group listen to those in the other regions, etc.? Do people in the I region feel that they get personal recognition they deserve? Do people in S feel like they get feedback? It's too cold and insensitive, etc. So there's a lot of valuable understanding that can come for a group in spending time to discuss the questions, having measured what the primary group culture is. Okay. Now the facilitator report is quite similar, but it's called a facilitator report because one of the main reasons we use it is for the facilitator. Okay. So it starts off with a group map, which is exactly the same as the group map in the group culture report. All right, but there's also an additional map here, which looks at the people in the group in each of the 12 different styles and what the percentages are there. So a little more in-depth information, okay? And also it looks at it a little differently in this graph here, and it's saying that we've got 41% of people who are fast-paced and outspoken, but 59% cautious and reflective, and then we've got 65% questioning and skeptical, and 39%, is it 35% accepting and warm. Now, as a facilitator, going into a DiSC session with a group, if you've got this information, right, you can see where the group is. If you've got 41% in C style, you better make sure that you're not biasing your activities around experiential, active, fun activities, all right? Because you've got 3 people in the I quadrant, but all these other people in the C quadrant who are less likely to be turned on by that kind of stuff, and they might switch them off, okay? Also, this profile has the culture stuff as well, okay? So the difference is, you can see here, we've got people's names. The group culture report has no names at all right? So the group culture report is best used with larger groups, okay? And then this is just a different example of an S-style culture, okay? But again, you've got the names, and in this part of the report, you've got the names of people with primary or secondary S on the left, and people who don't have a primary or secondary S on the right, okay? But you've got all the same questions down below to get the team discussing things. Now, I would use, and I do use, the facilitator report every time I'm running a DiSC session. But when I'm doing some team building with a group, I'm going to make sure we include a session where we go through the group culture report with the group and answer these questions, get him talking about the advantages and drawbacks and what impact it's having on the different styles, having this as a primary culture, etc. Okay. There's also some additional reports in the facilitator report because we've got names. So here we see a list of all of the individuals by style. So that's a handy thing for a facilitator to have. There's also this quick reference chart where you can see the names of people in each of the 4 quadrants, but it doesn't tell you where their dot is. So the next report does that, all right? Group map with names, and each dot has a letter of the alphabet in it. So you can look down at the list at the bottom there to see who's who, okay? You'll also see, if you can read the small print, this bonus page is only generated for groups of 26 or fewer participants. Simple reason, there's only 26 letters of the alphabet. So if you have 27 people, this page won't produce. It just won't generate when you generate the report, okay? The other thing I should mention, if you have a change in the group, someone leaves, someone new joins, you get 2 edits at no extra cost. Excuse me, and both of these reports are 25 credits each, okay? But you can edit it twice. So, and one edit might be 2 people have left and 3 people have joined. That's one edit. You just go in and edit it, add the additional people, and then produce the report, okay? So, great. myeverythingdisc.com. Now, we talked about the comparison reports, and if you're not using myeverythingdisc.com, then it's a pity, because there's a lot of value in this. I'm going to talk about Catalyst in a little bit too, but and Catalyst is actually taking over a lot of what Everything DiSC can do. But Everything DiSC is not going to go away in the short term, because the work of leaders profile and the sales profile are not planned to be on Catalyst at this point in time, or certainly not in the foreseeable future. And so there's still a need for myeverythingdisc.com to be available, especially to use with those profiles, okay? So this is the home page for myeverythingdisc.com, and anyone who's done an Everything DiSC profile can put their upload their profile, in a sense, it's not quite an upload, into their myeverythingdisc.com account, all right? And if you don't know how to do that, contact our team. And you as a facilitator can send out links to everyone you put through a DiSC profile to have them set up their account on myeverythingdisc.com. Now you can see from here that the top thing on the screen there is invite others to compare. All right, so I can click on that, type in someone's name, and it will send out an email to them to come into their myeverythingdisc.com account, and they've got to have a myeverythingdisc.com account with their profile in it for you to be able to find them. But if they've got that, their name will come up on a list. And here it shows you the list of the people that you have recently asked to do a comparison and they've accepted. Okay, you can see most of the Integro team here. All right. You can also build a group map of up to 10 people here. And if you've already done a comparison, obviously it'll be in this list, and you just, if you want to see the comparison, just click on the person's name and the comparison will come up. And this is what it'll come up looking like, right? So Sue has, they helped me put this slide, these slides together, and she's clicked on me. And so you can see KA being me, my dot, and the black dot being Sue. And up above that, you'll see choose a tip category. Okay, if you click on that, a drop-down list comes up, and the first thing on the list is going to be building relationships. And so when you click on that, it comes up with 2 continua that are, in most cases, the same continua that you would generate into a comparison report. And so you can see here that I'm somewhat outgoing. I'm very outgoing. Sue's somewhat private. All right. And here are some tips for me to deal with Sue and take that into account if we want to build a relationship. Okay. So there's 5 different tip categories, I think. And so we want to get buy-in. We're both very accepting, but we're both opposite on this is daring, careful again. Okay, this was in our comparison report before. So if I want to get Sue's buy-in for something, I better take this into consideration. Sue's very careful. Okay, so I need to take that into account. Okay, the fact that we're both accepting is going to make it easy for us. Managing tension, again, tips on if there is tension, how do we handle that between us? Okay, and the last one is working on a project. I'm very unstructured. Fortunately, Sue has some structure, all right? And I'm off the wall on focused on possibilities, and Sue's more focused on realities. She's sort of in the middle on that one, okay? So for those of you that use the sales profile, you may not know this, but anyone who has done the sales profile gets an additional section in their myeverythingdisc.com account. You can see up the top, it's my comparisons, my style, my reports, and my customers. But that's only available to people who've done the sales profile. And so they can actually profile their customers and get a customer interaction map. Okay. And so how that happens is on screen, you actually do the people reading process. So here's an example where I've identified a client, Brad Jones. He's male, and I've looked at the fast-paced outspoken scale and said, well, I think he's just on the cautious and reflective side of that, okay, close to the middle. And then on the other dimension, questioning and skeptical versus accepting and warm, I've chosen he's very questioning and skeptical. All right. Then I click on finish, and it comes up, this is the customer interaction map. Okay. So compared to me, Brad Jones tends to be more analytical and logic focused, more likely to question others, etc. We're completely opposite. Okay. And then it gives me some information on how to better interact with Brad. Okay. Looking at the priorities that are important to him. And as you can see, the priorities are a little different in the sales profile. We have competency instead of challenge on the DiSC scale. We have quality for the C priority. And they're the things that are really important to him. So that's what I need to focus on. Here's the bottom end of that page. So you get a full page strategy for dealing with this particular customer. Okay. Also, we have things like the history of DiSC in myeverythingdisc.com. Okay. All right. So then just to, we're sort of getting close to time, aren't we? Catalyst. Again, we've done webinars on this. If you want more information on Catalyst, contact our team. They can send you a link to watch a recording of one of the webinars where we go into a lot of detail on Catalyst. But Catalyst is actually your DiSC profile on steroids in a website, right? On a platform. So when you complete your profile, this is Sue's profile here, and this is when she completes answering the questions, this comes up immediately, right? You can't hold off on letting people have access to their profile. As soon as they take the profile, they're going to be seeing their results, all right? And so Sue's then gone into your colleague section and she's picked me because when you go into Catalyst, you can see everyone else on your team, all right? You can see comparisons with them. You can't see their profile. But so Sue's chosen me and it comes up with our priorities again. They're the same priorities we had before. Sue's got that extra priority on collaboration and I have one on action. And then although our dots are in the same quadrant, we have more differences than we have similarities. And again, that's coming from, to a large extent, well, it's coming from extra priorities like my action priority. It's coming from unexpected items, right, which are contributing to how we come up on the comparisons. And then here we have continua in Catalyst as well. So it's pretty much the same continua as you get in the myeverythingdisc.com profile, okay, or report. So, and we have the same applications: managing tension, connecting with each other or building a relationship, collaboration, and getting buy-in. And for each of those, it picks up 2 continua. I'm very tactful. Keith is somewhat tactful. You're very accommodating. Keith is somewhat accommodating. And so then we have benefits and roadblocks, and then the tips for Sue to work with me, okay? Because it's looking from Sue's point of view there, okay? Likewise, collaboration uses 2 different continua and buy-in with the same as what we had before. But all of this is just in the Catalyst platform, right? You don't have to generate a different profile or report. You don't have to send a request to someone to do a comparison because anyone in your organization or team is going to be in there anyway. Last thing I'm going to cover, I'm not going to have time to cover the Agile EQ and productive conflict today, but one of the things that I think people often overlook is in the back of your profile, page 16 in the workplace profile, there is a action plan page. It's an action plan for increasing your workplace effectiveness. What I do is I use this as the wrap up to a DiSC session. And it doesn't matter if with the leadership team I worked with the other day, this is the last thing I did with them. I got them to get in pairs, identify which of these 3 suggestions that you could implement to increase your effectiveness is the most appropriate for you to work on right now. All right. Yeah, that's for me, focus on follow through probably. Okay. And so it's giving me some tips on what I could do to do that. And these 3 strategies are personalized to you based on how you've responded to the questionnaire. Okay, so don't forget about this. It's right at the back of the profile in the workplace profile. It's page, well, not right at the back, it's page 16, which is after all the other application stuff and just before the pages, which I'm going to just show you to wrap up. Okay, so use it. If you want a activity around it and you've got the facilitator kit, there is a handout page in the workplace profile facilitator kit. And if you've got the latest version, which you can get if you haven't got it, you can get that as a fillable form, the PDF Adobe Acrobat fillable form, so people can actually type in their answers on their computers instead of printing it out and handwriting in. The last thing in the workplace profile is this 12 styles, building effective relationships. Another good activity is to get members of a team to go through that and write the names of their co-workers, their team mates, against the styles for each of them. So get everybody to share their style, everybody writes everyone's name in. And then if I want to know something about Sue, I know she's an SC style, okay? So I can switch to that page and go down and have a look at the SC style, and it's going to tell me all about her goals and how she tends to judge others and influence others and how she behaves under pressure and so on, okay? So another useful activity. This is the Agile EQ model. And what you can see here is that we've got, instead of priorities in the Agile EQ profile, we have mindsets, right? And a mindset is a state of mind with which you approach situations, okay? And so each of the 8 scales has a different way of approaching situations. And I showed you the DiSC styles expanded, and that empathy was one of my needs, okay? So no surprise, being an SI style, empathizing is my #1 mindset. The profile also gives me 2 additional strengths. I'm empathizing, receptive, and outgoing are the 3 mindsets that I'm naturally strong in. What that means is when I go into a situation, I'm looking to you, looking at the situation through that filter, all right, of being empathizing, being receptive, and being outgoing, okay? And I'll come to the next slide in a minute. I'll just show you why that is. Now, that means that all of the other 5 mindsets don't come naturally to me. They're not strengths, okay? And so I have the opportunity to learn to be more agile with my emotional intelligence by learning to use different mindsets, right? So the one that's actually most challenging for me is objective mindset, separating facts from emotions and keeping the discussion focused around logic, right? I can do that, but I need to be more conscious about doing it, right? Because my emotions come into play, and I like to get excited about stuff or be empathetic about things and so on, right? And then obviously being resolute and self-assured would also potentially be a challenge for me. So I'm going to be much more effective as a person, as a manager or whatever my role is, if I am able to adapt to use those other mindsets. And the profile actually tells me not only what my strengths are and what I don't naturally use, but I also, it shows me how to actually adapt to use those different mindsets. And there's about 22 videos in the Facilitator kit for this program giving examples of people getting stuck in a mindset and having a negative result, and then learning to adapt to use a different mindset to what's natural for them. Like for a D-style person, adapting to be composed, for example. Okay, so the videos are excellently done. All right, so that, and then I'll just show you the next slide as well. And so there's my 3 strengths. And the reason I use those mindsets is because I have a need to connect with others. Down the bottom left-hand corner, my needs. I need a harmonious environment. I need to be accepted, and I need to be helpful and supportive. First DiSC profile, it's actually put your needs in the profile itself. So this is why you use the mindsets you do. And so looking at those needs, it's going to be more difficult for me to be resolute or self-assured because there's a threat that those needs won't be satisfied. Okay, it's a fantastic profile. I love this profile. And it's something, it would be my go-to for, we've done workplace, what do we do next? I'd go to Agile EQ, right? For most people, because you can do it with anyone in the organization, regardless of what level they are, okay? Anyone that's suitable for workplaces, suitable for Agile EQ. Okay, thanks again for coming. It's great to have you here. And if you have any other questions that come up, please feel free to contact the team at Integro, and support@integro.com.au or 1-800-222-902. And we're mostly S-style people here, like me and Sue, and we love providing support. So just give us a challenge and we'll jump into it. Okay, thanks a lot.